The massive lecture hall aboard the Zephyrian flagship Dominance buzzed with anticipation. Thousands of alien cadets from across the Galactic Coalition filled the tiered seats, their various appendages clicking, chittering, and rustling with excitement. Today's lesson would be the culmination of their military training, how to efficiently eliminate the newest threat to galactic peace, humanity. Commander Zekthal, a towering insectid with razor-sharp mandibles and 4 arms ending in deadly claws, stood before the holographic display. His chitinous exoskeleton gleamed under the artificial lights as he surveyed his eager students. Representatives from 12 different species sat before him: the crystalline Vorthak, the gaseous Nebulans, the amphibious Kresh, and many others who had united under the Coalition's banner. "Attention, future warriors of the Coalition," Zekthal's voice resonated through the hall's translation matrix. "Today we conclude our comprehensive study of humanity, these primitive bipeds who dare to expand beyond their insignificant solar system." The holographic display flickered to life, showing a 3-dimensional model of a human male. The figure rotated slowly as Zekthal began his lecture with practiced confidence. "Observe their pathetic anatomy," he continued, pointing with one of his clawed appendages. "Humans possess only 2 arms, 2 legs, and a single head. Unlike our superior multi-limbed forms, they cannot multitask in combat. Their skin is soft, unprotected by natural armor or defensive secretions. They require artificial coverings to survive in most environments." A young Vorthak cadet, her crystalline form refracting the light into rainbow patterns, raised what might have been considered a hand. "Commander, what about their technology? Our scouts report they have developed faster-than-light travel." Zekthal's mandibles clicked in what passed for laughter among his species. "Crude imitations of our own achievements, Cadet Sherlin. Their ships are bulky, inefficient, and lack the elegant biointegration our vessels possess. They still rely on primitive metal alloys and chemical propulsion for atmospheric flight." The display changed to show human military equipment: rifles, body armor, and vehicles that looked impossibly primitive compared to the Coalition's energy weapons and living starships. "Their weapons fire solid projectiles," Zekthal explained with obvious disdain. "Projectiles? As if hurling rocks with extra velocity could compete with plasma disruptors or molecular dissolution beams. Their armor is static, offering no adaptation to different energy frequencies or environmental hazards." A gelatinous Nebulan student bubbled a question through the translation matrix. "What about their numbers? Intelligence suggests they breed rapidly." "Indeed, they multiply like parasites," Zekthal acknowledged. "But quantity without quality is meaningless. 1,000,000 insects cannot fell a mighty tree. Their rapid reproduction is actually a weakness. It spreads their limited resources thin and creates internal competition for survival." The commander moved to the next section of his presentation, displaying human settlements and cities. "Notice how they cluster together in dense populations. This makes them vulnerable to orbital bombardment and biological weapons. Unlike our distributed hive networks or quantum consciousness matrices, humans still think in terms of individual survival. They lack true collective intelligence." A reptilian Saurian cadet hissed a question. "Commander, what about their adaptation capabilities? Some reports suggest they can survive in various environments." Zekthal's secondary arms gestured dismissively. "Surface-level adaptability at best, Cadet Thesrak. Yes, they can tolerate a range of temperatures and atmospheric compositions, but this is nothing compared to our species' true environmental mastery. The Vorthak can process any energy frequency, the Nebulans exist in vacuum, and we Zephyrians can survive in conditions that would liquefy human tissue." The presentation shifted to psychological profiles of captured humans. Brain scans and behavioral analyses filled the display, showing neural pathways and chemical responses. "Perhaps most importantly," Zekthal continued, "humans are emotionally unstable. They form irrational attachments to other individuals, even across species lines. This empathy they prize so highly is actually a critical vulnerability. Threaten one human's offspring or mate, and they become predictably irrational." The cadets absorbed this information eagerly, taking notes with whatever appendages their species used for recording data. The lesson was comprehensive, every aspect of human weakness cataloged and analyzed. "Their decision-making process is compromised by these emotions," Zekthal elaborated. where we make logical, calculated choices based on maximum benefit to our collective species. Humans often choose courses of action that benefit only small groups or even single individuals. They will sacrifice strategic advantages to save their wounded. They will divert resources to protect the weak and elderly who contribute nothing to their war effort. A young creche cadet, her amphibious skin glistening with moisture, croaked a question. "What about their combat tactics, Commander?" "Primitive and predictable," came the swift reply. "They still engage in direct confrontation, believing in concepts like honor and fair fighting. They announce their intentions, follow rules of engagement that limit their effectiveness, and actually attempt to minimize casualties among their enemies. Imagine showing mercy to those who would destroy them." The display showed various human military formations and battle strategies, all analyzed and found wanting by coalition standards. They fight as individuals supporting a group, rather than as a true collective consciousness. This creates gaps in their coordination and allows for tactical exploitation. Their commanders must communicate orders verbally or through primitive electronic means, introducing delays and possibilities for interference. Zekthal paused for a moment, surveying his attentive audience. These were the future leaders of the coalition's military forces, and he wanted to ensure they understood the gravity of the situation. "Make no mistake, cadets," he said, his tone becoming more serious. "Humans are not to be completely underestimated. They have shown remarkable persistence and some degree of cunning. However, their fundamental biological and psychological limitations make them incapable of truly threatening our coalition." The commander moved to the final section of his presentation, practical combat applications. When engaging humans in battle, remember these key points. First, target their command structure. Remove their leaders and the remaining forces become disorganized and ineffective. Second, exploit their emotional attachments. Capture civilians or non-combatants to force tactical errors. Third, use their own sensory limitations against them. They rely primarily on light-based vision and sound-based communication, both easily disrupted. A chorus of acknowledgments came from the diverse assembly of cadets. They were ready to put this knowledge to use. "Finally," Zekthal concluded, "remember that this conflict will be brief. Humans lack the industrial capacity, technological sophistication, and unified command structure necessary for prolonged warfare against a galactic coalition. Our intelligence estimates suggest complete human capitulation within 2 solar cycles once hostilities begin." The holographic display showed projected casualty ratios. Hundreds of humans for every coalition loss, entire worlds falling within weeks, and the human home system surrounded and conquered within months. "Are there any final questions before we adjourn?" Zekthal asked. The hall remained silent. The lesson had been thorough, convincing, and left no doubt in any cadet's mind about humanity's inevitable defeat. They had learned everything they needed to know about these primitive creatures who dared to challenge the established galactic order. As the cadets filed out of the lecture hall, chittering and buzzing with excitement about their upcoming deployment against human space, none of them noticed the small monitoring device tucked away in a corner of the room. None of them suspected that every word of their comprehensive lesson had been recorded and transmitted across the galaxy. The device had been planted there 3 months earlier by Lieutenant Sarah Chen of Earth's Special Intelligence Division. While the Coalition had been studying humanity, humanity had been studying them right back. And in a small, unremarkable chamber aboard a human stealth ship drifting silently through an asteroid field 12 light-years away, Chen smiled grimly as she finished reviewing the transmission. "Well," she said to her commanding officer, "now we know exactly what they think they know about us." The war room aboard Earth's primary orbital defense station hummed with activity. Admiral Rebecca Martinez stood before a massive tactical display showing the positions of coalition fleets throughout local space. Her weathered face bore the scars of previous conflicts, but her eyes held a sharp intelligence that had earned her command of humanity's entire defense network. "Status report," she commanded, her voice cutting through the controlled chaos of the command center. Commander James Wright, her chief intelligence officer, approached with a data pad. "Ma'am, Lieutenant Chen's intelligence package has been distributed to all fleet commanders. We now have complete tactical profiles on 12 coalition species, their ship designs, weapons systems, and most importantly, their assessment of our capabilities." Martinez nodded grimly. The intelligence coup had been years in the making. While the coalition thought they were studying humanity, human operatives had been embedded within their society, learning their languages, their technology, and their weaknesses. "What's our fleet status?" she asked. "All vessels are in position and maintaining communication silence," Wright reported. "The Yamato battle group is holding position in the asteroid belt, the Churchill group is stationed behind Jupiter's radiation shadow, and the Mandela group remains in high Earth orbit, powered down to simulate civilian stations." The admiral studied the display carefully. The coalition had made one fundamental error in their assessment of humanity. They assumed humans thought like them. Where the coalition saw obvious tactics and predictable responses, humans saw opportunity. "Estimated time until the coalition fleet arrives at the edge of our system." 6 hours, ma'am. Their advanced scouts should reach the outer detection grid in 3. Martinez turned to address the assembled staff officers. Representatives from every human military branch and several allied intelligence agencies were present, along with some faces that officially didn't exist. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to face the largest military force ever assembled in known space. The coalition believes they're hunting primitive prey. They're about to learn that humans are not prey, we're predators." She gestured to the tactical display, which shifted to show coalition fleet formations approaching from multiple directions. "Intelligence indicates they expect to face traditional ship-to-ship combat with inferior human technology. They've planned their attack based on outdated data about our capabilities and fundamental misunderstandings about our psychology." A young officer raised her hand. "Ma'am, what about their claim that we're emotionally compromised? Their intelligence suggests using civilian populations against us." Martinez smiled coldly. "Lieutenant, that's exactly what we're counting on them to try. Dr. Yamato, would you brief us on Project Fury?" Dr. Kenji Yamato, head of the Defense Department's Psychological Warfare Division, stepped forward. He was a small, unassuming man whose mild appearance concealed one of the most brilliant military minds in human space. "The Coalition's assessment of human emotional responses is both accurate and catastrophically incomplete," he began. "Yes, we form strong emotional bonds. Yes, we will sacrifice tactical advantages to protect civilians, but they've missed the crucial corollary to this behavior." The display changed to show psychological profiles and historical data. What the coalition interprets as weakness is actually our greatest strength. Humans don't just fight for survival, we fight for meaning. Every civilian they threaten, every atrocity they commit, every act of cruelty they perpetrate only serves to transform our soldiers from mere combatants into something far more dangerous. The assembled officers listened intently as Yamato continued. "Throughout human history, our most devastating military victories have come not from superior technology or numbers, but from transformation of our soldiers into what we call righteous fury. It's not just anger, it's anger with purpose, emotion channeled into perfect tactical precision." Commander Wright pulled up historical examples on secondary displays. Images of human soldiers throughout history flashed by, faces showing not fear or desperation, but cold, controlled rage. When humans fight for something greater than themselves, we become capable of tactical innovations that no logical species would attempt. We take risks that computer-based tactical systems would classify as suicide, but which human intuition recognizes as necessary. Admiral Martinez took over the briefing. "The coalition expects us to fight defensively to protect our civilian populations and infrastructure. They're correct that we'll do both. What they don't understand is how we'll do it." The tactical display shifted to show the true disposition of human forces. What appeared to be civilian stations and unarmed transport ships suddenly revealed themselves as heavily modified warships and weapons platforms. Operation Blindside will begin the moment their advanced scouts enter our outer system. Phase 1 involves feeding them exactly the intelligence they expect to receive: panicked civilian evacuations, military forces scrambling to defensive positions, and communications traffic suggesting complete surprise at their arrival. The display showed simulated civilian ships fleeing from orbital stations, exactly as coalition intelligence would predict. Phase 2 begins when their main battle fleet enters the system. They'll interpret our defensive positioning as confirmation of their tactical assessments. Meanwhile, our real assets will be moving into final attack positions. The display revealed the true scale of human preparation. Thousands of disguised platforms, hidden weapon systems, and concealed ships throughout the solar system were highlighted in red. The Coalition's greatest strategic error, Martinez continued, is assuming that human technology remained static during their observation period. While they were studying us, we were developing countermeasures specifically designed to exploit their technological advantages. Dr. Sarah Kim, head of the Weapons Research Division, stepped forward to continue the briefing. Coalition shields are designed to deflect energy weapons and plasma charges. Their armor can absorb massive amounts of directed energy fire. However, their defenses are optimized against threats they understand. We've developed what we're calling kinetic penetrators, essentially very fast, very dense projectiles accelerated to significant fractions of light speed. She activated a tactical simulation showing Coalition ships being struck by weapons that passed straight through their shields, as if they didn't exist. Their shields literally cannot detect these projectiles because they're not energy-based. By the time their sensors register impact, the projectile has already penetrated their hull and detonated internally. Commander Wright added, additionally, Coalition tactical doctrine relies heavily on their ability to analyze and counter enemy technology during battle. They expect to face familiar energy signatures and conventional tactics. Instead, they'll encounter weapons systems and strategies unlike anything in their tactical databases. The briefing continued with detailed explanations of human innovations. Swarm missile systems that operated without central command and thus couldn't be disrupted by electronic warfare. Stealth technology based on manipulating gravitational fields rather than electromagnetic signatures. Weapons that used Coalition technology against them by hijacking their own ship systems. What about their claim that we lack collective intelligence? Asked an officer from the Marine contingent. Martinez grinned. That might be our greatest advantage of all. The Coalition species think in terms of hive minds and shared consciousness. They expect us to coordinate like they do, through direct neural links and instantaneous communication. Instead, we've developed something they can't even comprehend. The display showed human command structures and communication networks. Human intelligence is distributed but independent. Each unit, each ship, each commander can operate autonomously while contributing to the larger strategic picture. When they disrupt our communications, they expect our forces to become disorganized. Instead, each isolated unit will continue operating according to doctrine while adapting to local conditions. Dr. Yamamoto stepped forward again. This is what Coalition intelligence categorizes as our unpredictability. They see it as random, emotional decision-making. In reality, it's the result of training every human commander to think strategically while maintaining tactical flexibility. The Admiral looked around the room at faces that reflected grim determination rather than fear. The Coalition has studied humanity's weaknesses extensively. What they've failed to understand is that our weaknesses are also our strengths. They think our emotional attachments make us vulnerable. They don't realize that these same attachments are what allow us to coordinate without direct neural links, to trust each other in impossible situations, and to sacrifice individual advantage for strategic victory. She gestured to the tactical display one final time. In 3 hours, the Coalition will enter our system expecting to face a primitive, disorganized enemy using inferior technology and predictable tactics. Instead, they'll face the full fury of a species that has spent its entire evolutionary history learning to kill things bigger, stronger, and more dangerous than itself. The room fell silent as the implications settled in. They want to teach the galaxy how to kill humans, Admiral Martinez said quietly. It's time we taught them why that's not as easy as they think. Outside the station's viewports, stars wheeled slowly in their eternal dance. Soon, those stars would witness something the galaxy had never seen before. Humanity pushed to its absolute limits and responding not with desperation, but with calculated, methodical, and utterly ruthless precision. The hunters were about to become the hunted. Commander Zekthal stood on the bridge of the Dominance, watching through the massive viewport as his fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the human home system. The sight that greeted him matched perfectly with his expectations: chaos. Human ships could be seen accelerating away from orbital installations around the outer planets. Civilian transports and cargo vessels fled in all directions, their primitive engines leaving obvious heat signatures across the electromagnetic spectrum. Military vessels attempted to form defensive formations, but appeared disorganized and vastly outnumbered. "Fleet status report," Zechthel commanded, his mandibles clicking with satisfaction. His second-in-command, a crystalline Vorthak named Sherlin, consulted her energy-based display. "All Coalition vessels have successfully translated into the system, Commander. We count 2,347 ships of the line, plus support vessels. Total fleet strength is just over 3,000 combat-capable units." The numbers were overwhelming by any standard. The largest human military formation detected by long-range sensors consisted of fewer than 200 ships, and those appeared to be a mix of military vessels and converted civilian craft. "Excellent," Zechthel said. "Begin standard reconnaissance. I want detailed scans of all human positions, weapon capabilities, and defensive installations. We proceed according to the tactical doctrine established during our comprehensive study." Across the bridge, alien officers from a dozen different species worked with efficient coordination. Their shared consciousness networks allowed for instantaneous communication and perfectly synchronized tactical responses. This level of coordination was something the primitive humans could never achieve with their individual minds and crude communication systems. The reconnaissance drones launched from the Coalition fleet spread throughout the system, their sensors mapping every significant object from the outer asteroid belt to the inner planetary orbits. The data they returned continued to confirm Coalition intelligence assessments. "Sir," reported a Nebulan communications officer, his gaseous form rippling with transmitted data, "we're detecting significant communication traffic between human vessels. Most transmissions appear to be evacuation orders and requests for assistance. Voice patterns suggest panic and confusion among their command structure." Zechthel nodded approvingly. Everything was proceeding exactly as predicted. Humans faced with overwhelming force were responding with their characteristic emotional instability and lack of collective coordination. "Any signs of significant military resistance?" he asked. Sherlin processed data from multiple sensor networks simultaneously. "Negative, Commander. We detect approximately 180 military-grade vessels attempting to form defensive positions around the third planet. Their technology appears consistent with our intelligence estimates: primitive kinetic weapons, basic energy shields, and chemical propulsion systems." The Coalition fleet moved deeper into the system with majestic inevitability. Their living ships pulsed with organic energy, while their manufactured vessels hummed with the power of technologies beyond human comprehension. This would not be a battle, it would be an extermination. "Commander," called out a Saurian tactical officer, "the human vessels are assuming defensive positions around their homeworld, as predicted. However, they appear to be transmitting surrender terms." Zechthel's mandibles clicked in amusement. The humans were attempting negotiation even faster than Coalition psychologists had estimated. Their emotional instability and attachment to individual survival made them predictably weak when faced with certain defeat. "What are the terms of their proposed surrender?" he asked, though the answer was merely a curiosity. The Coalition had not come to negotiate, they had come to eliminate a potential threat before it could develop further. The Saurian officer hissed as he processed the transmission. "They offer immediate cessation of all expansion beyond their home system, payment of tribute in the form of raw materials and manufactured goods, and restriction of their military forces to system defense only." "Declining, of course," Zechthel said. "Inform them that unconditional surrender is the only acceptable outcome. All human military forces must be disbanded, all space-capable vessels surrendered, and their population relocated to designated worlds under Coalition supervision." The response came back within minutes. The human negotiators requested time to consider the terms and asked for a temporary ceasefire to allow civilian evacuations to continue. "Sir," the Nebulan officer reported, "human civilian ships are indeed continuing to evacuate the inner system. Our sensors show massive population movements from orbital installations and planetary surfaces." Zechthel considered this development. Allowing civilians to escape would reduce the psychological pressure on human military forces, but it also demonstrated the coalition's superior moral position. Unlike humans, the coalition did not wage war against non-combatants. Grant them 6 standard hours for civilian evacuation, he decided. This demonstrates both our tactical confidence and our civilized approach to warfare. Continue monitoring their military positions during this period. The coalition fleet maintained its positions, while human civilian ships fled deeper into their system. Long-range sensors tracked thousands of vessels moving toward the outer planets and beyond, exactly as human behavioral models had predicted. During the ceasefire, coalition intelligence officers continued their analysis of human defenses. The picture that emerged confirmed every aspect of their pre-war assessments. The human defensive strategy is entirely predictable, reported the chief intelligence analyst, a multi-tentacled creature whose species specialized in pattern recognition. They have concentrated their forces around strategic locations, their homeworld, major industrial centers, and communication hubs. This creates obvious weak points that can be exploited through standard coalition tactics. Zekthal reviewed the tactical displays with satisfaction. Human ships were arranged in traditional protective formations around fixed positions. Their weapons appeared to be simple projectile systems with limited range and effectiveness. Most importantly, their ships operated as individual units rather than as components of a collective intelligence. Their command structure shows clear hierarchical organization, the analyst continued. Elimination of key command vessels will result in tactical paralysis among remaining units. Our simulations suggest resistance will collapse entirely once their command network is disrupted. As the ceasefire period neared its end, final preparations for the assault began. Coalition ships moved into optimal attack positions with the precision of a choreographed dance. Each vessel knew its role in the coming battle through shared consciousness networks that allowed for perfect coordination. All units report ready for final assault, Sherlin announced. Human forces remain in defensive positions around their primary world, no significant changes in their tactical deployment detected. Zekthal studied the tactical display one final time. 3,000 coalition vessels faced fewer than 200 human ships. The technology gap was insurmountable. The numerical advantage was crushing. The strategic situation was hopeless for humanity. Send final surrender demand, he ordered. Inform the humans they have one final opportunity to submit to coalition authority. If they refuse, we will commence immediate hostilities. The response came back quickly. We respectfully decline. Humanity will defend itself. Zekthal felt a moment of genuine puzzlement. Did these creatures truly believe they could resist the combined might of the galactic coalition? Their emotional instability was apparently even more severe than psychological profiles had suggested. Very well, he said, his 4 arms moving to activate the fleet communication system. All units, commence final assault. Objective is complete elimination of human space-based military capability. Avoid unnecessary casualties among surrendering units. The coalition fleet began its attack run, energy weapons charging and bioships flexing their organic weapon systems. This would be over quickly. What Zekthal didn't know was that the civilians his fleet had been tracking for the past 6 hours weren't refugees at all. They were human military units disguised as evacuation ships, moving into positions throughout the outer system. The communication traffic his intelligence officers had been monitoring wasn't panicked coordination. It was carefully orchestrated misdirection. And the human ships maintaining defensive positions around Earth weren't the primary defense force. They were bait. As the coalition fleet accelerated toward what they believed was a helpless enemy, sensors throughout the human system began detecting energy signatures that didn't match anything in coalition tactical databases. Thousands of previously undetected objects were suddenly powering up, emerging from asteroid fields, decloaking from behind planetary bodies, and revealing themselves from what had appeared to be empty space. The humans had spent the ceasefire period exactly as coalition intelligence predicted, evacuating civilians and preparing defenses. What coalition intelligence had failed to predict was the scale and sophistication of those preparations. Zekthal was still congratulating himself on the success of coalition tactical doctrine when the first kinetic penetrators began impacting his fleet. By the time he realized that everything his species thought they knew about humans was wrong, it was already too late to matter. The lesson was about to take a very different turn. The first indication that something had gone catastrophically wrong came when the Dominance's shields simply ceased to exist. Commander Zekthal watched in stunned disbelief as his flagship's defensive systems registered a breach that should have been impossible. There had been no energy discharge, no plasma bolt, no recognizable weapon signature. One moment the shields were functioning normally, the next moment alarms were screaming as something punched through the ship's hull like it was made of soft tissue. "Report," he commanded, his four arms working frantically at the bridge controls. "Unknown projectile impact on decks 40 through 47, Sherlin responded, her crystalline form flickering with alarm patterns. "Hull breach detected. The projectile appears to have passed completely through the ship." Before Zekthal could process this information, the tactical display erupted with similar reports from across the Coalition fleet. Ships that had seemed invulnerable moments before were suddenly registering critical damage from weapons that their sensors couldn't even detect until impact. "This is impossible," he muttered, his mandibles clicking rapidly with stress. "Our shields are specifically designed to deflect all known projectile weapons. No kinetic impact should be able to penetrate our defenses at this range." A Nebulan communications officer rippled with urgent data. "Commander, we're receiving similar reports from all battle groups. Unknown weapons are achieving direct hits despite full defensive measures. Casualty reports are significant." The tactical display painted a picture that defied everything Coalition military science understood about warfare. Throughout the fleet, ships were taking damage from projectiles that moved too fast for point defense systems and carried too much kinetic energy for shields to deflect. "Where are these attacks originating?" Zekthal demanded. The answer came from multiple sources simultaneously, and it made no sense. "Sir, projectiles appear to be coming from multiple vectors throughout the system. Our long-range sensors are detecting launch signatures from positions we previously classified as empty space, asteroid fields, and planetary orbit." Sherlin processed streams of sensor data at quantum speeds. "Commander, tactical analysis suggests the humans have positioned weapons platforms throughout their entire system. Current estimates indicate thousands of previously undetected installations." Zekthal felt something he had never experienced before in decades of military service: genuine confusion. Coalition intelligence had mapped every significant object in the human system. Their reconnaissance drones had conducted comprehensive scans. There had been no indication of this level of military preparation. "How is this possible?" he asked, though he suspected no one on his bridge had answers. The response came from an unexpected source. A human voice suddenly filled the bridge, speaking in perfectly accented Zephyrian through the communication system. "Commander Zekthal of the Zephyrian Defense Forces, this is Admiral Rebecca Martinez of the Terran Defense Network. I believe we need to have a conversation." The bridge fell silent except for the continuing damage reports from across the fleet. Somehow, the humans had penetrated Coalition communication encryption and were speaking directly to the flagship's command center. "How did you access this frequency?" Zekthal demanded. "The same way we've been accessing your systems for the past 3 years," Martinez replied calmly. "While you were studying us, we were studying you. The difference is that we're much better at it than you are." The tactical display suddenly changed, showing not just Coalition fleet positions, but detailed internal schematics of individual ships. Somehow, the humans had gained access to the fleet's tactical network and were displaying information that should have been impossible for them to obtain. "Your infiltration of our society was fairly comprehensive," the human admiral continued conversationally, even as her forces continued to methodically destroy Coalition vessels. "We learned a great deal about your capabilities, your technology, and most importantly, your assumptions about us." Zekthal realized with growing horror that the entire war had been orchestrated by the humans from the beginning. They had allowed Coalition intelligence to study them, but they had controlled what that intelligence revealed. "Those lessons you've been teaching about human weaknesses," Martinez said, "we wrote them. Every tactical assessment, every psychological profile, every piece of intelligence your forces gathered, We made sure you found exactly what we wanted you to find. The Coalition fleet was now taking devastating losses. Ships that had seemed invincible were being systematically destroyed by weapons that operated on principles Coalition science couldn't immediately comprehend. Worse, their own tactical advantages were being turned against them. "Sir," reported a Saurian officer, "our bioships are reporting system failures. Something is interfering with their organic control networks." "That would be the nanoscale devices we've been introducing into your ship's biological systems," Martinez explained helpfully. "We've had operatives embedded in your military structure for years. Every time your vessels docked for maintenance, every time you took on supplies, every interaction with what you thought were conquered species, we've been preparing for this moment." Zekthal's tactical training finally overcame his shock. "All units, withdraw to maximum engagement range. Activate collective consciousness battle protocols." "I wouldn't recommend that," the human admiral said. "Your collective consciousness networks are precisely what we've been targeting. Every ship that links into the network is giving us access to your entire fleet's command structure." The warning came too late. As Coalition ships attempted to coordinate their retreat through shared consciousness, human cybernetic warfare programs began propagating through their networks. Ships that had been functioning normally suddenly found their systems compromised, their weapons targeting their own allies, their navigation systems providing false readings. "This is impossible," Zekthal protested. "Your technology level cannot support this level of sophistication." Martinez's laugh was audible over the communication channel. "Commander, you've made the same mistake that every species makes when they first encounter humans. You assumed that our current technology represented our maximum capability. What you were observing was what we chose to show you." The tactical display now showed the true scope of human preparation. Throughout the solar system, weapons platforms that had been disguised as asteroids, mining stations, and communication relays were revealing their true nature. The primitive, human ships were shedding their disguises and displaying technology that matched or exceeded Coalition capabilities. "For 3 years, we've been preparing for this exact scenario," Martinez continued. "We knew you would study us, so we gave you data that would support the conclusions we wanted you to reach. We knew you would attack us, so we prepared defenses designed specifically to counter your tactics and technology." Sherlin processed incoming data with desperate speed. "Commander, fleet casualties are approaching 30%. Human forces are demonstrating capabilities far beyond our intelligence estimates. Their weapons appear to be designed specifically to counter our defensive systems." "That's correct," the human admiral confirmed. "While you were learning how to kill humans, we were learning how to kill you. The difference is that we're much faster learners." Zekthal made a decision born of desperation. "All units, target the human homeworld directly. If we cannot defeat their fleet, we will eliminate their population centers." "Another predictable response," Martinez said. "We anticipated you would attempt to target civilians when your military assault failed. That's why Earth's population was evacuated to secure locations months ago. What you're seeing is an elaborately constructed decoy." The Coalition fleet's attack on Earth succeeded perfectly, reducing the planet's surface to molten slag within minutes. The victory was entirely meaningless. They had destroyed empty buildings and automated systems, while the actual human population remained safely hidden throughout the outer system. "You see, Commander," Martinez explained as Coalition ships continued to fall to human weapons. "You never understood what you were really studying. You thought you were observing a primitive species that could be easily conquered. What you were actually observing was a species that had spent its entire evolutionary history learning to kill things bigger, stronger, and more technologically advanced than itself." The tactical situation had become hopeless. Half the Coalition fleet was destroyed or disabled. Human forces were converging from all directions, and their technological advantages had been completely negated. "We learned something very important from your infiltration of our society," the human admiral continued. "We learned that you think in terms of overwhelming technological and numerical superiority. You can't conceive of a weaker force defeating a stronger one through superior tactics and preparation." Zekthal's mandibles clicked as he realized the full scope of the trap humanity had constructed. You planned all of this from the beginning." "From the moment your species made contact with us," Martinez confirmed. We knew this confrontation was inevitable. The only question was whether we would face it as victims or as hunters. We chose to be hunters. The remaining coalition ships were attempting to withdraw to hyperspace, but even their retreat was being controlled by human forces. Cybernetic attacks had compromised their navigation systems, leading them into carefully prepared ambushes rather than to safety. "Commander Zekthal," Admiral Martinez said, "you're about to become the sole survivor of your fleet. We're going to send you back to Coalition space with a message for your superiors." "What message?" he asked, though he already suspected the answer would redefine the galactic balance of power. "Tell them that humans learned their lesson very well. Now it's time for the galaxy to learn ours." The Coalition High Council chambers had never witnessed such silence. Commander Zekthal stood before the assembled representatives of 12 species, his once pristine exoskeleton scarred and dulled from the battle that had destroyed his fleet. The quantum consciousness matrices that linked the various species flickered with shared disbelief as he delivered his report. "Total casualties: 2,893 vessels destroyed, 112 captured intact," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Human casualties: 0 vessels confirmed destroyed, minimal personnel losses." The crystalline Vorthak representative, High Counselor Sherlin Prime, processed this information through her quantum consciousness network before responding. "Commander, please clarify. Are you stating that a force of fewer than 200 primitive human vessels defeated a coalition fleet of over 3,000 ships?" Zekthal's mandibles clicked once in confirmation. "The intelligence we possessed regarding human capabilities was completely fabricated. Every assessment, every tactical profile, every technological evaluation was deliberately constructed to mislead us." A ripple of concern passed through the assembled counselors. The Nebulan delegate, whose gaseous form shimmered with agitation, posed the obvious question. "How long have they been deceiving us?" "From the moment of first contact," Zekthal replied. "Admiral Martinez informed me that human operatives have been embedded within coalition society for over 3 years. Every piece of intelligence we gathered was carefully controlled to ensure we reached the conclusions they wanted us to reach." The implications were staggering. The coalition's entire strategic understanding of humanity had been based on deliberate misinformation. Worse, if humans could so thoroughly manipulate coalition intelligence gathering, what other assumptions about primitive species might be equally flawed? High Counselor Thesrak of the Saurian hegemony hissed his displeasure. "What is the current tactical situation in human space?" Zekthal consulted his remaining data systems. "Unknown. My vessel was the only one permitted to escape. Admiral Martinez stated that I was being sent back specifically to deliver information to this council. However, long-range sensors detected massive fleet movements throughout human space as I departed." The tactical displays around the chamber activated, showing what little information coalition intelligence could gather about the current situation. The picture was deeply disturbing. "Human fleet elements have been detected moving beyond their home system," reported the Chief Intelligence Coordinator. "Initial reconnaissance suggests they have established forward bases in at least 6 adjacent systems. However, our attempts to conduct detailed surveys have been unsuccessful." "Unsuccessful how?" demanded the Kresh representative, her amphibious form glistening with stress secretions. "Every reconnaissance probe we've sent has been either destroyed or captured before completing its mission. Human stealth capabilities appear to be far more advanced than our assessments suggested. We are essentially blind to their current military dispositions." Zekthal felt obligated to provide additional context. "During my brief captivity aboard their command vessel, I observed technology that exceeded our own capabilities in multiple areas. Their computer systems appear to be based on quantum processing architectures similar to our own consciousness networks, but without the collective dependency we assumed was necessary." The council chamber's atmosphere grew increasingly tense as the full scope of the intelligence failure became apparent. "What specific capabilities did you observe?" asked the Vorthak counselor. Zekthal's response painted a picture that challenged fundamental assumptions about technological development. "Their kinetic weapons operate at near-light velocities using gravitational acceleration techniques. Their defensive systems appear to manipulate space-time geometry rather than relying on energy fields. Most significantly, Their ships demonstrated the ability to coordinate tactical actions without centralized command control. Impossible, stated the Nebulan delegate. Effective military coordination requires consciousness integration. Individual minds cannot achieve the necessary processing speeds for complex tactical operations. Yet they did, Zekthal replied simply. Every human ship operated as an independent unit while contributing to a coordinated strategic plan. When we disrupted their communication networks, their effectiveness actually increased rather than decreased. The council members processed this information through their shared consciousness networks, but the conclusions were uniformly disturbing. Humanity appeared to have solved coordination problems that had puzzled coalition species for millennia, and they had done so using methods that coalition science didn't fully understand. What were Admiral Martinez's specific demands? Inquired the Saurian counselor. Zekthal consulted his memory carefully. The human admiral's words had been precise and deliberately chosen. She stated that humanity was prepared to establish diplomatic relations with any coalition species willing to acknowledge their sovereignty and territorial integrity. However, any further military action against human space would result in what she termed comprehensive retaliation against coalition infrastructure. The threat was clear, but its scope remained undefined. Coalition space encompassed thousands of systems across multiple galactic arms. Human, comprehensive retaliation could mean anything from targeted strikes against military installations to systematic dismantling of coalition civilization. Did she specify the nature of this retaliation? Asked the Vorthak counselor. She stated that humanity had spent 3 years identifying critical vulnerabilities in coalition technology and infrastructure. She implied that they possessed the capability to disrupt our consciousness networks, compromise our bioship control systems, and interfere with our quantum communication matrices. The council fell silent as the implications became clear. Coalition civilization was built on technologies that humans appeared capable of disrupting or destroying at will. The survival of 12 species might depend on the goodwill of a race they had planned to exterminate. What are our strategic options? The Kresh representative asked. The chief military coordinator, a multi-tentacled creature whose species specialized in tactical analysis, provided a grim assessment. Limited. Human technology appears to be specifically designed to counter our capabilities. They have demonstrated superior stealth technology, more effective weapon systems, and tactical coordination methods that exceed our own. Could we assemble a larger fleet, overwhelm them through sheer numbers? Inadvisable. Admiral Martinez specifically stated that additional military action would trigger immediate retaliation. Furthermore, our intelligence regarding their true military capabilities is clearly inadequate. Any fleet we assembled might face the same fate as Commander Zekthal's force. The conversation continued for hours, but the conclusions remained consistent. Humanity had outplayed the coalition so thoroughly that military options were no longer viable. Finally, High Counselor Sherlin Prime posed the question that everyone had been avoiding. Commander Zekthal, in your professional assessment, what should our response be to human demands for diplomatic recognition? Zekthal considered his response carefully. As the only coalition officer to survive direct combat with human forces, his assessment would likely determine the fate of 12 species. High Counselor, during my captivity, Admiral Martinez made one additional statement that I believe to be significant. She said that humans preferred cooperation to conquest, but that they were fully prepared for either outcome. She emphasized that humanity's goal was not to dominate the galaxy, but to ensure their own survival and development. He paused, organizing his thoughts. Based on my observations, humans appear to be offering the coalition a choice. We can acknowledge their capabilities and establish mutually beneficial relationships, or we can continue to treat them as enemies and face the consequences of that decision. The Council processed this assessment through their consciousness networks. The conclusion was unanimous, if humbling. Motion before the Council, announced the Vorthak counselor. Formal recognition of human territorial sovereignty and authorization for diplomatic contact to establish peaceful relations. The vote was unanimous. 3 months later, the first human ambassador arrived at the coalition capital. Dr. Sarah Kim, the former head of Earth's Weapons Research Division, was greeted with a level of respect typically reserved for representatives of the most powerful coalition species. During her initial address to the High Council, she made a statement that would be remembered throughout galactic history. The coalition spent years teaching its members how to kill humans, she said. Today begins humanity's lesson to the galaxy on how to live with us. I believe you'll find our teaching methods much more agreeable than our previous demonstration. The lesson had indeed concluded. Humanity had graduated from being the subject of instruction to being the instructor. And the first lesson for their new students was simple. Never underestimate a species that has spent its entire evolutionary history learning to survive against impossible odds. The galaxy was about to discover that humans were not just survivors. They were teachers, diplomats, engineers, and explorers. But when necessary, they could also be something far more dangerous than anything the coalition had ever imagined. They could be friends who would never forget that someone had once tried to teach the galaxy how to kill them. And in the vast complexity of galactic civilization, that memory would prove to be humanity's greatest strength and the galaxy's most valuable lesson.